The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Nick Beresford, a development professional with over 20 years of experience with the United Nations, was appointed as UNDP resident representative in Georgia in September 2021. Before, he served in Cambodia, Bangladesh, Somalia and East Timor, as well as in the UN headquarters in New York, USA. Beresford holds a Master of Science in Development Economics from Sussex University. He also holds degrees in Audit and Accountancy and English Literature. Nick Beresford visited BMG last week in the program Tertili, or the Full Stop. The Checkpoints would like to highlight two main points from the interview. First, since it's already 30 years that UNDP has been present in Georgia, what are some of the main results achieved during this period?
UNDP is one of the larger UN agencies in the country. We spend about $30 million a year on development programs in Georgia. In the past 5 years, that's gone up. That's doubled the amount that we've been investing in development here. If I look at the UN as a whole, we spend around about $60 million per annum. We've been here for 30 years now, since the restoration of independence, and we'll have our 30th anniversary year this year. And in that total time, we spent more than $350 million. That's in nominal terms. If I was to calculate it taking into account of inflation, that would be, of course, a much higher figure. But I wanted to also, just if I may, add on to that to look at the total amount of development investment in Georgia. And if we look at it, the amount of investment per capita, the amount of investment per person in the country, it's more than $200. And that puts Georgia in the top 10 receiving countries of the world, if we exclude the small island states. So that's a very high level of development expenditure. It's nearly $0.8 billion. And that was in 2021 about 4.4% of GDP. So my point is that level of expenditure is actually quite significant and quite large. And I think two other things that need to be borne in mind when we think about the development expenditure is that, first of all, it's not spent evenly. It's spent with a focus on the poorest. It's spent on the focus with the people most in need, particularly the grant money that comes through UN and UNDP. And the second point I wanted to make also was that we do that in partnership. It's very much working closely with our government partners, closely with our ministries, but also very closely with civil society organizations, local NGOs. Georgia is blessed by having a very effective and dynamic civil society ecosystem. It has many very effective local NGOs, and when we're working with government and we're working with CSOs, this is how we do our work when it's at its most effective.
And second, what does Georgia need for its development?
Georgia's had a very open economy. Georgia's had also an economy very focused on exports. It's got the deep and comprehensive trade agreement with Europe. It's taken good advantage of that. And so I think on that side, it's well positioned. I would then focus on how do we take advantage of that growing level of trade, that growing economy, but also how do all Georgian people benefit from it? So the question for me is not just about the economic growth and the rate, which is important, of course, but it's about the distribution and the inclusion. I think, we've got a lot of social protection programs. We have about 177,000 people in programs. Those are very important because they help take people just above the poverty line. But they're less effective in getting people to carry on progressing up to, for example, a comfortable middle-class level of prosperity. And there, I think you need deeper investments in health and education. And that will make us more attractive for investments because increasingly companies, and particularly service companies, and particularly companies in new technologies, they're looking for a higher and higher level of skill. This is always going to be where they're looking for. We're very competitive on salaries and wages, although the Larry is very high, but maybe it'll come down a little bit. But we're still very competitive there. So I think the most important thing then is making sure our labour force, and particularly our young entrants to the labour force, have given the opportunities on education and given the opportunities of skills and training. And that is what the firms need. And that's what's going to make us more competitive. It's not just the level of education and the investment that's important. Although it is important, if I look at the level of investment in education at the moment, it's about 4%, 4.1%. The European average is about 5%. It doesn't sound a big difference, 1%, but it makes a big difference. And in fact, I think we should be investing more, but also it's the quality. If you look at the PISA scores, this is a score of educational attainment that's used around the world. There are 78 countries in this, and we rank about 70th. So it's very low. The quality aspects, I think, particularly in our public sector, need to be addressed more effectively. That is going to be, that's a long-term investment, but that's absolutely necessary, I think, for making those people coming into the labour force more skilled. It means the companies then have access to that labour force, and that makes us more competitive and more productive. And those investments in human development, those investments in people are absolutely key, I think, to making the economy well shared, everybody prospers, but more dynamic, larger and more competitive.